quick, Josh, tell me, how many sets should I do for each exercise that I'm doing? It's really not that cut and dry, unfortunately. For sure, you need to do at least 2 sets. 1 set of anything isn't really going to do much for you unless you're trying to do a 1 rep max PR, right? But 10 of the same exercise, 10 sets, might be way out of the question. So it's obviously somewhere in between. Now, before I continue on, if you're more of a visual type person, you want to see like a clip art with a text below it where you want to read it, I actually did a very similar post to this video on my Instagram handle at Garage Gang Gyms. So let's continue. It's technique, how many sets, it kind of plays hand in hand. So you want to do few enough sets that your technique is still good enough that you're being safe. But you don't want to do too few of sets that not only does your technique not degrade, but it's not enough stimulus for you. And then we also have to consider weight. So there's 3 major variables going on, and that's not even considering, are you fed? Are you hydrated? Are you rested? Where are you in your training? How long have you been training? How skilled are you? Let's just kind of put those on the side, but those are elements too. Let's just try to take on these 3. How many reps are you doing? How many sets overall so that you can maximize your technique? And then how does weight play in there? Okay, so bell curve number 1, sets. Most people know this, that your first set of 6, 8, 5, 2, 1, 19, however many repetitions you're doing, your first set is probably not going to be your best. In fact, you could really get into some nuance here. Some people think that when they're doing a set of 5 or a set of 8, your first rep isn't even that good. The first set, you do it, it feels weird. You just put this new weight on for this exercise, bench, squat, deadlift, pull up, whatever you're doing, and it's your first exposure. It feels kind of weird. So you're a little overthinking, right? Maybe you have a little nerves. Oh my gosh, today I got to do 8 sets of 6. Holy crap. You do your first set of 6 and you're like, oh, thank God. And then you realize, hey, I can do all 8 sets. Now, bell curve wise, we know 1 set, you're going to have some issues anyway. So for sure, 2 sets is going to be fine. It's going to benefit you. Again, as long as you're not going for a 100% max, right? But as we do more sets, as we go up that bell curve, at some point we're doing so many sets, so much work that we start to fatigue, and then our technique is going to degrade. We get mentally tired, physically tired. Okay, so there's one element that we have to keep in mind. I wish I could tell you a very specific number. It's just not true. Now, when it comes to weight, the heavier your weight in relation to your max, so let's say your max is 200 pounds on whatever squat, and you're at 180 pounds. That's pretty close to your max. But let's say you're at 140. That's not that heavy, but it's still heavy enough. It's 70%. So 70%, we're going to get away with a few more sets because the weight isn't so heavy that we have to keep our shit together perfectly for every repetition. It's not a 2-rep max, right? But again, with those extra repetitions, we are adding fatigue. So, it's this double-edged sword that we're going to be walking. Now, you can imagine that bell curve is going to be wider with our limits. As we get heavier in weight, we're not able to, first of all, do as many reps, but also not as many sets to qualify to help us get stronger, move faster, have better technique, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve for the day. You can do junk sets, but that's totally different. That's, for the most part, just breaking you down and fatiguing you, and that's when your technique is completely different than what you're trying to practice on. Maybe your speed is completely out of the range that you're trying to do. Maybe you're just not even mentally there, and you're just taking 30 seconds to do 2 squats. Whatever. So the heavier the weight, the fewer sets we're going to be able to do, right? You can't do 50 sets of 2 at 95%. That's pretty crazy, right? So as we do more sets with more weight, we actually have a limited amount of sets. It's even smaller than if we're doing maybe 70%. Now, as we get heavier in weight, it's not that your form gets better per se, because ideally we want to have the same form for all of the exercise that we do. Every squat, every bench, we want them to be as similar as possible. Now, granted, the heavier it is, the more muscle we recruit, the more motor units we're recruiting, and so on. What I like to say is your form doesn't get better, but the need to have better form gets higher. You're not going to get away with the same errors on a 95% squat, say it's 190 pounds of your 200 versus 120 pounds, 60%, right? You can get away with some stuff on 60%, which is also why weight does matter, right? If you're trying to improve your 1 rep max technique, you're not going to improve it at 30% doing sets of 2. Now, there can be some nuance to this if we're changing tempo, adding pauses. Again, I'm trying to keep it simple for you guys. So when you're deciding how many sets should I do, think about, well, where am I in weights? Okay, where am I in my training? Hey, last week, what did I do? I did 4 sets of 8 last week and it felt okay. Okay, maybe I can keep my shit together for 9 reps this week. Maybe I can keep my shit together for 5 sets this week, but keep in mind, every set that we do, chances are of tipping over that bell curve and getting too deep on the other side. We don't want to always be optimal. Let's say it's 4 sets is optimal. I'm not saying it is, but let's just say for this example it is. 4 sets is optimal. There's some benefit at times to do 5 or 6 sets where you go beyond perfect so that you force your body to adapt so that you can have optimal technique for more sets. But keep in mind, every time we do 1 more rep, 1 more pound, 1 more set than we did last time or even any time before, there's a need to recover. And the more novel that feeling is, so the new 1 rep max, the first time I've ever done a set of 10 with this, every time you have a first, it might take even a little bit more because there was a sense of arousal to do that set. Maybe there's a sense of burnout when you finish that set. Maybe neurologically it's just going to tax you a little bit more. Maybe you just barely squeaked it by, right? Something to keep in mind as well. So 3 visuals, and when they're overlaid, there is some play. It's all theoretical though. My perfect might be 4 to 6 sets of squats. Your perfect might be 8 sets of squats, depending upon the weight, depending upon how many repetitions you're doing, and depending upon how good you are at squatting in the first place. I hope that helps. What we go do.